All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack the incredible story of how one of the most successful investors ever built his entire philosophy on one single catastrophic failure. This is the logic behind Ray Dalio's principles.
So picture this. It's 1982. The man who would go on to build the world's largest hedge fund hits absolute rock bottom. He was so convinced he knew what was coming for the economy. He bet everything on it, and he was dead wrong.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How does somebody turn a moment of complete and utter ruin into the very foundation of an empire? Well, the answer lies in a pretty radical shift in thinking. But hang on, before we go any further, for anyone who isn't familiar with him, let's just quickly get on the same page about who we're talking about. Why does this guy's story matter so much?
Well, Ray Dalio is the genius behind Bridgewater Associates, which is the biggest and one of the most successful hedge funds on the entire planet. He's been called the Steve Jobs of investing, which tells you something about his unique, almost scientific approach. And his book, Principles, which actually started as just an internal company manual, blew up and became a global bestseller.
So, keeping all that success in mind, let's rewind the clock back to that critical moment in 1982. Because this wasn't just a small miscalculation. This was a public, spectacular, complete meltdown.
I mean, Dalio went all in. He was on television, he was writing op-eds, totally convinced he saw a crash coming that nobody else did. But the market did the exact opposite of what he predicted. He was so wrong that Bridgewater was pretty much wiped out. He had to fire the people who worked for him, people he considered family. And this failure wasn't just professional, it was deeply, deeply personal. I mean, think about it. He went from being this investing oracle to having to borrow $4,000 from his own dad just to cover his bills.
This is what Dalio calls his painful bottom. It was, without a doubt, the most agonizing moment of his career. But, and this is the crucial part, it was also the most important.
Because what he did next, well, it changed everything. Instead of running away from all that pain and humiliation, he turned around and leaned right into it. He realized it wasn't just noise, it was a signal. You know, most of us, our natural instinct is to avoid pain. We pretend it didn't happen, or we blame somebody else, and we just try to move on as fast as we can. Dalio did the complete opposite. He looked at that pain as a giant flashing red light, screaming at him that something was fundamentally broken in how he made decisions. And this led to maybe his most fundamental principle, and it's captured in a really simple formula. Pain plus reflection equals progress. He developed this belief that evolution, whether it's in nature or in our own lives, it actually requires stress. You have to push your limits, you're going to feel pain, but if you can reflect on that pain in a thoughtful way, you get stronger. Now, this wasn't just some nice, fuzzy idea for him. He literally turned it into a machine, a repeatable process for confronting reality head-on and making real progress. So let me show you how that process works.
He calls it the 5-step process. First, you have to have crystal clear goals. Step 2, you identify the problems, those painful realities that are blocking you. Then, and this is so important, you diagnose the root cause of those problems, not just the symptoms. After that, you design a plan to get around them, and finally, you just do what it takes to execute that plan. It's this continuous loop. You strive, you fail, you learn, and you improve.
And the big theme that ties this whole thing together is evolution. For Dalio, life isn't about being right all the time, not at all. It's about how you adapt when you realize you're wrong. He sees life as just a constant series of encounters with reality. So you could almost boil his entire recipe for a successful life down to this formula here. You start by confronting reality, whatever that tough situation is, then you apply open-mindedness to truly understand it, and you bring the determination to push through it. That whole cycle of pain and reflection is what, at the end of the day, leads to real success.
Okay, so Dalio didn't just apply this stuff to himself. He used these exact same principles to build a really unique and frankly intense culture at Bridgewater. He calls it an idea meritocracy. It's a place where the absolute best ideas win, and it doesn't matter one bit who they come from.
But to make a system like that actually function with real emotional human beings, he knew that everyone, and that includes him, had to overcome the two biggest psychological roadblocks that prevent us from seeing reality clearly. And here they are. They are your ego, that part of you that desperately wants to be right and is terrified of being wrong. And number 2, your blind spots, those areas where your own way of thinking literally prevents you from seeing the full picture.
I love this quote from him because it just nails it. Just admitting you have blind spots is the game-changing first step, right? If you're so arrogant that you think you see everything perfectly, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, exactly like he did back in 1982.
So just how different is this in practice, you might be wondering? Well, let's put a typical workplace right next to the kind of culture Dalio built and see for ourselves. I mean, this chart really shows you the night and day difference. In most offices, what happens when you make a mistake? You hide it. At Bridgewater, they're treated as chances to learn. Decisions aren't just made by the boss. They use a system called believability weighting that gives more power to informed opinions. And forget polite office politics. Instead, you get radical transparency, where disagreement isn't a personal attack, it's a tool to get closer to the truth.
So, after going through Dalio's incredible journey from total failure to massive success, the question really flips back onto us, doesn't it? How can we actually apply these lessons in our own lives? Let's just boil it down to the most important takeaways.
First, learn to embrace painful realities. See them as signals for growth. Second, you have to recognize that your own ego and your own blind spots are your biggest enemies. And finally, work on building systems, whether it's for yourself or for your team, where the best ideas are the ones that win, not just the ideas from the loudest person in the room.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. Dalio's entire system, his whole philosophy, is designed to fight against these two fundamental human flaws. So the real question this leaves us with is a personal one. Knowing this, what kind of system will you create to overcome your own?